Hello, welcome to For Book Lovers Only, where we interview some great authors and talk about some amazing books. My name is Rob Brown, your host and chief book lover here at For Book Lovers Only. Today, I'm really excited about the interview and the author that we have. This guy is like a true definition of a Renaissance man. He's been homecoming king at Howard. He's written books. He's been a public official. He's actually served time in federal prison. He is a paratrooper. He was a paratrooper in the United States Army, served the nation honorably. This guy has done it all, and I'm so excited about having him on the set. Please welcome to For Book Lovers Only, Mr. Rob Hall. Rob, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
That's
It's
great.
exciting to be here.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about your background. Where are you from?
I grew up in upstate New York.
Okay. Was that Albany or a little?
Utica, New York,
Utica?
about right the center of the state. Very interesting part of the state. Everybody thinks New York State, they're thinking New York City, but it's a great life up there in upstate New York, and I enjoy growing up there.
Now, do you get up there a lot, or do you visit there, or you?
Not so much these days,
Okay.
but I used to.
Okay. And where do you live right now?
I live in Camp Springs, Maryland.
Okay. Yeah, that's close to where my parents live. Good neighborhood. Good neighborhood. And you currently are the editor of the Hall Street Journal. All right. Tell us a little about that.
The Hall Street Journal is an online publication with a focus on education. Particularly, we work towards the areas of self-development and self-help, but particularly in the areas of finance and money and business, because the Wall Street Journal is a fantastic publication, obviously #1 in the world, but they use a lot of language that's kind of esoteric, that kind of loses people. And they'll talk about things like quantitative easing quite casually, when the average person doesn't understand what quantitative easing means or is. They don't understand macroeconomics. They don't understand those terms. So we try to create a publication where our goal is to kind of speak in the common language and help people understand why these terms, why these situations are important to understand, and how they impact their lives.
I see. And did you learn a lot about finance and business when you were at Howard, or is this pretty much self-taught?
It's a combination. It started off when I was a young child, growing up in upstate New York. I was a single, my mom was a single mother with 3 children living on welfare and housing project. And unfortunately, I spent a lot of days where towards the end of the month, we get hungry.
Right.
And it was odd to me to be 5, 6 years old looking in a store and seeing all this food and going, how come we can't eat? There's food everywhere.
I'm hungry, right.
And at 5, I would ask my mother these questions, and her answers always had something to do with money. And so that started a fixation with money for me at 5, 5 years old. Like, this is the key to life and living, joy and pain. This is the difference between hunger, pain, and happiness. And so I've been a student of money and finance literally my entire life for the most part, and was blessed to transcend my beginnings and get further education. And so I try to bring to bear both my not my humble beginnings and the blessing of education, and kind of bridge a gap for people who may not otherwise have that gap bridged.
I see. And you actually wrote, you wrote one book called The Principles, and those, I imagine, are lessons learned in your experiences and things that you've educated yourself on with regards to personal finance and business and banking. Tell us a little bit about The Principles.
Yes, The Principles is really about just that, the fundamentals, the basics. Because what I found coming from housing projects and welfare and foster homes and, having the black cheese and the powdered milk and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then going into the higher finance, the things that I learned at Howard University Business School, the things I learned as a real estate developer, I found that most people don't have a fundamental construct for how to look at money, how to understand the fundamentals of finance, income, expenses, assets, liabilities, cash flow, net worth, basic financial statements, income statements, balance sheets, that which is the fundamental of business, fundamental principles we don't have. Further, they don't really understand how things kind of work together. They don't understand. Well, we know we needed life insurance, for instance, or that real estate is important, and lots of people make money in real estate, or taxes, tax strategies. People don't want to, want big tax returns and things of that nature. We think about investments and we look for investments, but we really don't understand how it all plugs together.
Right.
We really don't understand how to fit the pieces of those puzzles together. How increasing our liabilities increases our monthly debt, which decreases our cash flow. There's a dynamic between these things.
Right.
And so the principles is about teaching not just the individual components, but the dynamic between them. And together that gives a broader based construct, but in plain language. Didn't use a lot of plain language just now, but we deliver those concepts, those high finance concepts, in plain language.
Okay. And when you wrote the book, was the book directed towards a particular demographic, or is it for anybody that wants to learn more about personal finance?
It's absolutely for anybody who wants to learn more. Lots of different types of people. I happen to be African American, and certainly African Americans have been disenfranchised from the fundamentals of capitalism, business, and finance for a long time, in my opinion. Certainly a broad swath of us. But there are other people and that just haven't had the grandpa sit them on the lap and teach them
Exactly.
how to use a Japanese candlestick charts to do technical analysis of a stock portfolio. And there's things that we just don't get exposed to. And so it's got a broad-based target. Really, anyone who wants to learn can learn.
Okay. And you also have done some things in real estate as well, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a real estate developer. I started out in finance. Started out as a mortgage loan originator, and then a mortgage loan officer.
Interesting.
Then a senior mortgage loan officer, and then eventually into development, which is probably the most complex aspect of real estate because you deal with everything.
I see. And I know that you had some rocky times. I know you had gotten into some trouble with the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Obviously, that was difficult period. Basically, I got into trouble for the way I raised a substantial amount of money. 7 figures, and I have my intentions, and once the government decides you have other intentions, it's very difficult to get out of the crosshairs there. I fought the best fight that I could, and didn't turn out well for me, and I ultimately ended up spending over 3,000 days in federal prison. Something I never ever thought I would have to go through. I was about 32 years old when it happened. I think it was 2006 until 2014. So it was a large portion of my adult life I spent incarcerated, and during that time I focused on keeping my mind strong by continuing to read, and I did a lot of writing. I actually wrote about 8 books, and I studied consistently. I read, I taught courses, I developed curriculums. I just believe in being productive, and whether or not I'm happy or had a good day is always boils down to whether or not I was productive in that day.
That's an amazing mindset. More people should have that type of mindset. Now, when you were incarcerated in a federal prison, I know you had written a few other books, 2 of which, other than the principles that you have today, the Bartimaean Transformation
Mm-hmm.
and Fatherless Sons. Did you work on those when you were in federal prison?
Yes, actually, Fatherless Sons was the first book I wrote, and I think when you're in those stations in life, the introspective is bound to happen. You kind of set aside for a moment. You're ostracized from society, and it gave me time to reflect on my life and my future. And so, Fatherless Sons really was the result of that reflection, that initial reflection. But it's more than about me. It's the subtitle is that it's a memoir on the common plight of African American boys, and so I realized that my story is not uncommon, and lots of African American boys have grown up without father figures,
right.
or have experienced that search, and so the broader idea is to help change the statistic. And that is that the most difficult child to place in foster or adoptive housing, I grew up in foster homes, is an African American male over the age of 5. That essentially a system is set up results in the fact that if you're African American male over the age of 5 and you don't have parents, you're going to grow up in foster, not just in foster homes, but in group homes, because not even African American couples want you in their home.
Really?
Yeah, even among African Americans, certainly among non-black, you know, because they essentially see these boys as, you know, carjackers waiting to happen, and so they don't want to take them into their home. And that is a statistic that I think is very sad, and my hope is to change it by humanizing them, the Tamir Rices of the world, that they have emotions, that they have potential, you know, that they could grow up to be, you know, Barack Obama, who was the son of a single mom, who could have, you know, potentially been in those situations. So
exactly.
I want to illuminate their possibility, and and importantly humanize them, so that maybe people would give them a chance.
That's remarkable. Now, after you wrote Fatherless Sons, you wrote a few other books. You wrote the Bartimaean Transformation. Tell us about that.
The Bartimaean Transformation came really as a result of my Christian walk, and that is part of how I kept my sanity for, you know, 8.5 years in federal prison. Every week I had to be replenished by my faith walk, and eventually I spent a lot of time studying in my faith walk, and there was this story that fascinated me even as a young child. Growing up, my foster parents were ministers, so I spent a lot of time in church. And the foster parents I was with for the longest, I was with them from the time I was 10 till I graduated from high school. And the story of blind Bartimaeus in the Bible has always been the most fascinating story in the entire Bible to me, because it was so stark, because it was about a blind man who was a beggar, who was sitting in the dirt by the side of the road. You know, 2,000 years ago, there's no Americans with Disabilities Act, there's no Seeing Eye Dogs, there's no cane, there's nothing.
Right.
And he doesn't even have a name. Bartimaeus is the name they call him in the Bible, but it actually means son of Timaeus. So they just called him, you know, that's Timaeus' boy, the blind boy.
Right, really didn't even have a name.
He didn't have a name.
Okay.
He didn't have, you know, anyone there care for him. And literally, he took 10 steps. In 7 verses of the Bible, he took 10 steps. And those 10 steps absolutely transformed his circumstance, his situation, his life, his future. 10 simple steps he took. And so the Bartimaean Transformation is about the 10 steps that blind Bartimaeus took to transform his life, and how those steps can help us transform our lives. And that was part of what I received while I was away, and helped me get through. And I'm hoping that it will help other people get through, whether they're in the faith or new to the faith or away from the faith. They're fundamental principles of Christian teaching that I think can be beneficial to anybody.
Well, what are one of the steps in the Bartimaean Transformation?
Well, one of the unique ones, I think, was that he cast his cloak aside. There was a cloak that he wore that kind of represented his condition, his state, his old life, his past, where it had everything to do with where he had come from, but it had nothing to do with where he was going. It was the cloak of a blind man. And when Jesus asked him to come, the first thing that he did was take that cloak and throw it aside. Mind you, he couldn't see, so it's not like he could easily go back and find it.
Right.
But he, still a blind person, cast aside the cloak of his past and really focused on his future. And so many of us, you know, we get hung up in what we've been through, you know, prior titles, circumstances, situations.
Exactly.
I've been branded, you know, I'm a felon, I was a single mom, I was whatever. But those things are about our past, and they're not necessarily about our future. And so one of the steps we take as part of our personal transformation is to cast aside the cloak of the past.
That's remarkable. I love that concept. So we also know that you had served honorably in the United States Army as a paratrooper, and you had also served on public office. Are you going to be writing books about those types of experiences as well, or?
I haven't gone into anything related to the military. I do have a keen interest on political science. I'm a minority conservative, which is kind of odd. But I do have some writings I'm interested in, focused on that area. And then what was the other thing you mentioned?
Being in public office.
Oh, public office. Yeah, so just the political writing, I do have an area there, but no, nothing else.
Do you have any books that are coming out within, let's say, the next 6 months that you want to discuss or anything?
Sure. I have a book on relationships, which is odd because I've never been married, but it's about biblically based relationships. It's kind of was a fun project for me, called The Black Woman's Guide to a Man by a Man Who's Black. And
That's an interesting title. I have to hear more about this.
Yeah, it was kind of something that came to me. My muse was actually, this is very odd, the ducks and geese that were at the prison where I was at. And over years, I watched them and the way they interacted, as it became a metaphor for me. And obviously, this is going to be a weird book, but it's good. It really juxtaposes the worldly view of relationships versus the biblical view of relationships, where women are seen as sex objects and men are seen as objects of finance and money, capital, and which has nothing to do with the biblical explanation of marriage.
Right.
It's totally different. And so I just kind of compare and contrast the two, and just have some very straight talk with women about my concept of what works and what doesn't. Just being straight and honest.
Now that book is directed for women, or is it directed pretty much for anybody? Is it written
It's
for
really
women?
directed towards women, in particular the black women that I love. It is directed toward them. I have a daughter who is growing into a beautiful, she was already beautiful, growing into a young lady.
Right.
A senior in high school, and kind of a lot of the things that I hope she would take with her into this crazy world we've got out there of relationships that are happening today.
That's wonderful. And you're also doing some public speaking too, or you got some public speaking engagements. Tell us a little bit about that.
The public speaking, really, most of the time I'm speaking about real estate and finance and personal wealth strategies, because there's such a need, there's such a dearth, and there's very few African Americans who are teaching in those areas, publicly doing courses. So I do that a lot. I just spoke at University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I've spoken at Prince George's College. I was just booked to speak at Delaware State, and we're booking about to book at Morgan State. They're finalizing our dates. So I'm doing something of a college tour.
And that's a lot.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot speaking there. I spoke at some community centers, done some speaking with youth. So I like to teach finance. I've done some fundraisers for adoptive and foster care programs, because that's obviously something near and dear to my heart. The DC Metropolitan Foster and Adoptive Parents Association, I spoke for them. They're doing a fundraiser for them, fantastic cause. So I really just kind of get out there and communicate. I can't say I'm an expert in everything at all, but what I hope to be is my objective, maybe be something like you, is a fantastic facilitator of a conversation that needs to be had. And we need to have these conversations about fatherlessness.
Very important.
We need to have these conversations about finance. We need to have conversations about transforming our lives. We need to have conversations about relationships. We need to have conversations about things that are substantive, that really affect us. My passion for political science is about the real impact that it has on our lives, on our futures, on our children. So I just enjoy having substantive conversation and sharing whatever it is that has come my way in my 42 years as a young man, and then also hoping to learn as part of the process of sharing.
And when people want to learn more about your books and the activities that you have going on and events that you have planned in the future, do you have a website for them to visit?
I certainly do. The website is hallstreetjournal.com. The Hall Street Journal. My name is Rob Hall. That's my street journal. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. But HallStreetJournal.com is really a destination for gurus and to teach and people to become students and learn. And where it's like a community of teachers and students where we'll be able to share and grow and develop.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. I think this was a really great interview, and I'm so happy that you were able to share your story with our viewers. And we look forward to you coming back again and talking about some more books. I definitely want to get you back on the show so you could talk about the book about relationships, because that's going to be a really interesting
Dicey.
interview.
Dicey.
Well, thanks again. We look
Thank
forward
you.
to seeing you. And thank you for watching For Book Lovers Only. If you want to learn more about the Bartlett-Mahan transformation, the principles, and fatherless sons, you can go to www.forbookloversonly.com. And while you're there, get on our mailing list. We also like for you to visit the Village at www.villageconnector.com. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in and hearing about our guest, Rob Hall. We look forward to seeing you again. My name is Rob Brown, your host, and remember, if you love books, we have a home for you. See you next time.